Okay, should be good to go.
Good morning, everybody. It's 10:04 a.m. on August 20th, 2024. This is a regular meeting of the Kentucky State Board of Elections. I'm Michael Adams, the Secretary of State and Chief Election Official and Chair of the Board. I'll call us to order. I'll recognize every member. I think we have everyone here today. I'll start in the room here in Frankfort, and then I'll go to the Zoom. Member Brangers.
Deanna Brangers, member, Jefferson County.
Member Perry. You're muted, Member Perry.
Sorry. Sue Carol Perry, a member, Shelby County.
Member Ferris.
Eric Ferris, member, Jefferson County.
Member Griggs.
Julie Griggs, member, McCracken County.
Member Chandler.
Ben Chandler, member, Woodford County.
Member Johnson.
Jerry Johnson, member, Franklin County.
Member Skolnick.
Corey Skolnick, member, Jefferson County. And Mr. Secretary, I apologize, but I'm going to have to leave at 11 today.
Understood. Member Sears.
Dwight Sears, member, Pulaski County.
And we also have Tabitha Clemens with the KCCA to present later. Glad to have you with us, Tabitha. So we have a quorum and we'll proceed to our business. Our first item is something that we've had on hold since the primary pursuant to a recount petition that was filed by the candidate who came in second in the 57th Circuit Commonwealth's Attorney Republican primary election. That's Russell and Wayne counties. My understanding is that litigation has concluded. I believe it was because the candidate didn't post bond to pay for the recount. Is that right?
It is.
Taylor. So that means that there's no further obstruction to us certifying the results of that election. They're in the packet here. So the total is 2,490 votes for Matthew Leverage and 1,490 votes for Lee Wittenberg. And so with that, do we have a motion to certify these results?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. There is one remaining election from May. We anticipate getting an opinion from the Supreme Court in the Cole Carney and Zeitz election. I don't know if that opinion will exactly explain what we're supposed to do, but we have still held certification in that election pending further guidance from the court. So I think by the next time we gather, we'll have that. Next, read and approve minutes for our last meeting, our special meeting on August 13th. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. So we have one county left for review and a vote on their election plan for November. If we could let our guests in the waiting room come on. So we have Kevin Mooney, the Bullitt County clerk, and we have Troy Wood with the Bullitt County School District and Council, Michael Owsley. Is that everybody that we have as a guest?
Sorry, I just stepped out to pick up a document. It's Mike Owsley. Yes, Superintendent Bacon has a medical procedure scheduled this morning. He could not reschedule. So Troy Wood is here as the Director of Operations.
Understood. So why don't we start with this in the discussion period? Well, we'll do it however y'all want to do it, but would y'all like a presentation or would you like to move into a motion and second, then have a discussion and then ask questions.
Who's that question directed to? The members of the board?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you, Secretary.
Mr. Secretary,
Yes.
I would suggest, since we left the special meeting with, the idea that there was going to be a trip to look at the locations and for the board and the clerk's office and your office and our office to try to work on this, just an update of what that yielded and what happened. Not all the, ins and out and details, but the major points from it.
That's a good point. Would you like to go?
This is Karen, and so Mr. Secretary, myself, Heather Quinn, and Greg McNeil from the Secretary of State's office, we made a trip to Bullitt County, Clerk Mooney. We went around to the locations that first, the 6 locations that were mentioned previously at the board meeting as options. We also looked at the 3 schools, and we didn't go by the convention center. We had seen that before and knew it was available, but we went by the 2 middle schools and the elementary school, and saw the layout, saw the parking, saw the separate entrance where they could, where the voters could enter. We went by the Jesse Schott gym. We went by the Richard Terry Hall Center. We went by the vendor market. We looked at where the Mount Washington First Baptist Church is. That was another, the Calvary Christian Church and Little Flock Baptist. We found that neither church was available for use. Personally, the Vendor City Market is inadequate. Just the layout, the lot of things in that building is for sale. It's not well kept. And I think that clearly that would be unserviceable for voters to enter in and out. So that, while it has a good sized parking lot, it's very rough. And the Mount Washington First Baptist Church does have a parking lot. They have a gym. We did see that. It is near one of the, I think it's the Mount Washington Middle School. They're close together. The parking at Mount Washington Middle was clearly, was more enhanced. There was more parking there, separate entrance. The Zonton Middle School had good parking. It has a separate entrance. It appears to be, a side door where if good security and well marked, I think, voters could enter there easy enough. And the Mount Washington Elementary School, instead of, I think East Side Middle School was offered. Apparently the Mount Washington Elementary School was preferable. There may be some concerns that have come up about that particular location this morning. Richard Terry Hall is not, while it's got a fairly good parking facility, somewhat good, inside there's a lot of unusable area. There's a large stage, there's bleachers backed up, some concerns there about, ability to put very much equipment in there. The Jesse Schott gym is a beautiful gym in memory of this young man. They have really done that very, very nicely. Is serviceable in terms of being able to put a lot of equipment there, but they do share the parking lot with another center that must be pretty active with exercise and a playground and some other things could, be problematic in terms of parking. It's close to the road. It's not as good a parking as the school is there. Clerk Mooney provided some pros and cons of ability and access, which he knows that area much better than we do. And again, like I said, the Little Flock Baptist Church declined to be able to be used, as did the Calvary Christian Church. I'm sorry. And I would let Clerk Mooney speak to some of the conversation that he may have had with a couple of the other places. But I mean, Mr. Secretary, does that kind of cover?
Yeah, I agree with
you might have to
that.
add?
So here's what I think we should do. We have a full agenda and we have a hard stop. So we can just proceed to questions from our to our guests, or we can give them each a short 2-minute, 3-minute speaking period, whatever suits you all. But I think we need to move pretty quickly. Would y'all like to have Kevin speak for 2 or 3 minutes and then the school district speak for 2 or 3 minutes, or would you all rather go into questions?
Well, I have a question. Did we get anything that looks like a compromise solution out of this?
I'll leave that to our guests. Have y'all had any discussions since we met a week ago?
No, I can, this is Mike Ousley, the board attorney. I can speak to that. We haven't had any discussions with the clerk regarding that. Troy Wood, who is on this call, on this Zoom meeting, did follow up on locations, and we can cover that in the 2 or 3 minutes. I will respond, Mr. Chandler, that he was able to obtain the facility of the Houchins Center, and they have committed to utilizing that if it's acceptable to the local board. But there haven't been any compromises reached between the district and the board. If the decision is to proceed with the 3 schools being utilized over our objection, the district will close. That's
well, needless to say, the board is searching for a compromise. I think everybody on the board would like to find a sweet spot that satisfies both the needs of the clerk and the local board and the needs of the school district. I, for one, am not, I'm cognizant of the very important issues that the school districts have, that this is a very difficult matter for the school districts. At the same time, we want to run an election that is good for the citizens of Bullitt County. I feel like everybody's probably on that same page, and I wish that we could figure out a way to get ourselves to that sweet spot, wherever it may be.
If I may speak, my name's Troy Wood. I'm the Chief Operations Officer for the district. Thank you so much for your time. I'll try to be brief. We do have confirmation from the SHOT gym of access, and we do have confirmation from Mount Washington First Baptist Church. We did receive a call this morning from the Houchins Industry Building, which is the vendor mall. It's an 18,000 square foot building in Mount Washington. And they assured me that the interior space is adequate enough for that, and that the exterior could be cleaned up and that could be a usable space. And as a district, we'd be willing to help with anything needed to make sure that is an appropriate use of space, if it need to be cleaned or any of that. For us, we're looking at a 10,000 square foot location at Paracut Springs that's central to the district. And then we have the SHOT gymnasium, which is on the north end of our district, and then the First Baptist Church on the east end of our district, which gives 3 viable locations that we believe, based on the data and election data, would accommodate early voting. And then if we add in the additional 18,000 square feet of the vendor city or Houchins building, again, based on data, I feel like that would actually serve the needs of our voting community. I'm not sure if you looked at the space and believe the same, but if you look at the numbers of voters that did turn out in previous elections, we believe it more than accommodates the need for our district. And I guess from sure.
Can I ask a question of Mr. Ousley?
Yes.
Mr. Ousley, so what we found is some of the locations that were suggested either said they weren't interested or they weren't communicative when they were contacted. Is it your position that if any, let's assume for the sake of argument that some of these substitutions would work, is it your district's position that if even one school is utilizing early voting, then the whole district has to shut down?
That's what I have been advised by the superintendent. And we had conversations with Taylor, the board counsel, and he and I don't have the same view of the statute, but it is our view that the district would close. And as we said in an earlier session, that's not just for the 3 days of the early voting because of the arrangement before to put in the equipment and the arrangement after to pick it up. That's a week in the spring and a week in the fall. And the other problem, let me just point this out. This calendar, the school calendar, that was been worked on since December, has been in place since spring. I mean, if we knew a year ago that we were going to be looking at this, we could arrange the calendar differently. But we're now asking to completely rearrange the calendar for parents and staff, and it will ultimately be very disruptive to the school district. And that's one of our huge concerns.
Member Skolnick.
Yeah, I just have a question. We're working under a new statute that really doesn't have any legal interpretation or case law, but common sense also comes into play. And is there any reason, if the only real solution that's workable here is to use the schools, not to just go in combined fashion and ask a court to bless our interpretation so that the schools don't have to be closed? And that to me seems like a possible option here.
I can't address whether my client would be willing to do that. I think that that's a possibility, I suppose. I haven't considered that, board member. We also have, we have issues with ADA compliance. So one of the sites that we'd have to put the people who are voting through the school as opposed to a separate entrance. We don't know about security. That we went through this last time. We were promised security, and when we did use one of these early voting sites, and it did not occur. We don't know who's going to provide the security. If it is dictated that we have to use one of these sites, I don't know a reasonable solution that permits the use of the school buildings. And there's nobody else trying to do it, except I think it was pointed out that apparently Knox County did for some reason I don't understand. I wasn't involved in that.
Knox County has they're allowing the use of their facility, but they have a separate building, a separate entrance, and separate parking where there will be no interaction with the main entrance of school, no interaction with students or staff. So they wouldn't have to have building access to get to their point.
Thank you, Mr.
Voting locations.
I didn't have that information. Thank you, sir.
Has anyone on either side of this spoken with the sheriff about providing security?
We've had meetings. So we provided notice 2 years ago with some security issues and made a compromise the first year to allow the use of our facilities. And we had the sheriff's department involved that year. And they showed up and left. And Mr. Mooney acknowledged that we were supposed to have security, but stated that no one stated whose responsibility that was. So he didn't take that on. And then the second year, we provided notice that we couldn't use our facilities for that reason. And we got a compromise as well. And then had one of the sheriff's office, we had one deputy assigned to a location that had to leave and was not replaced. So from our point of view, we've had 2 years where security was supposed to be present and there was a flaw in the process and we ended up without having security. And at the time I was principal at one of the schools in use, and we stationed staff members outside that door, the gym door, to make sure no one could gain access. But it's an unarmed staff member that would not be able to prevent something, if someone in the community came in with the intent to cause harm. So from our point of view, we would want something guaranteed showing, and we met with several folks, Mr. Mooney included, our sheriff's department that second year to make sure we had a viable plan in place. And that still kind of fell short. Having one officer assigned, I don't believe is adequate enough in the case there would be an emergency, as in last year's situation. Having multiple officers would be certainly our request if we had to do that moving forward. But we would want to sit down with the local sheriff's department again this year and see what that looks like and get something set in stone that would guarantee that we would have the protection. It takes one incident, given exposure to our students that would be have us all in hot water. But again, I think the stance on that is if we have to use our schools, Dr. Bacon doesn't want to chance that. Our superintendent, his only course of action would be to shut our schools down, which would require us to alter our end of year calendar.
Kevin, what about on your end, on the County Board of Elections end? Has the sheriff made any representations about security?
I have met with Chief Payne from the sheriff's office. We have talked about the locations, getting them a list of all of the locations where early and election day voting will be occurring. It is our plan to also meet with all of the police chiefs in the cities where there are voting locations to be held. And that between the sheriff's office as well as the police chiefs, everybody knows where these locations are. The chief and I have had discussions regarding having officers available. We have talked about the possibility of using the constables to some degree. It's my understanding that Dr. Bacon mentioned that there were school resource officers in possibly some or all of these locations. It's my understanding that those are law enforcement officers as well. I think that there's the ability to learn from the past and do better in the future, looking toward this November election. I've also am going to a meeting with the fire chiefs of the county tomorrow and talking about things that they can provide, not necessarily from a security standpoint, but from emergency situations and letting them know what the inside of a vote center looks like and what have you. So I think we're in a better, stronger place than we were in past years. And the main thing to learn is to learn from the past and not replicate it.
On Friday, Kevin, the status of the 6 proposed substitution locations was that 2 said no and 2 didn't respond and 2 responded favorably. Has there been any change in that?
The only one that had changed, Little Flock Baptist Church and Calvary Christian Center both told me no, that I could not come and use their facilities. The Vendor City Flea Market in Mount Washington, the former Houchins building, they have still not contacted me or reached out. Why they have reached out to the school system, I'm not sure, but they have not reached out to me, and my telephones and my email are working. The Hillview Community Center and the Jesse Schott building, I have talked to the mayor, and there is agreeableness on those locations, but as Ms. Sellers went through and discussed the pros and cons of them, this is a presidential election cycle with the anticipation of high voter turnout. This is not necessarily a county or a state office election, which have lower turnouts. This, across our 4-year cycle, is the biggest election that we will deal with in 4 years. And to compromise the availability of resources for our voters to be able to vote, I don't think that's what the state board is meaning to do. And I know it's what we're trying not to do here locally, and that's why we've presented this plan.
Mr. Chairman, I think that the reason that Houchins spoke to Mr. Wood is he pursued them. Troy, can you just address that?
Yes, I've called and left them messages every day, twice last night. He called me this morning and verified it, and they are actually he noted that he could reach out to Mr. Mooney and explain the details, costs, if there are any costs. And if that were to be the case, where there were some costs incurred, the district would probably be able to assist with that as well. But I followed up twice last night and again this morning, and they returned my phone call this morning. I do want to say as well, like, it is our desire to compromise and work with Mr. Mooney. We've been partners for many, many years on election day. So for us, we're willing to be partners and want to be partners. The difficult thing for us is the fact that this statute changed in April. We meet as our entire community are involved in our calendar planning process. We send out surveys in November. We present, 3 to 4 viable options for calendars. They vote on that in December. It's voted and approved at our board in December and then shared in January. So for us to retroactively change things mid-year is the difficult part. If we had to do something moving forward, it would be much easier as we start the process this year. We can present options that may accommodate the early voting process. But with the changes in April, we just weren't afforded the right to do that. Our hope again was that with 4 confirmed locations throughout our district, with one being centrally located in Paracut Springs, it's 10,000 square foot space. We believe that one space would accommodate our entire county, but to be convenient and have locations for 3 other locations dispersed throughout our district would even greater accommodate our voters. Our hope was that would be the compromise that Mr. Mooney would be willing to have, that would allow our voters to have regional access and not be inconvenienced with a little bit further travel to our central location, and would allow us to not impact our school schedule. And we're also looking at, when we change our school schedule, we're changing extracurricular events and ball games and things that are in contracts, home and away contracts with teams. So it's not just a simple change. We are changing the entire scope of what we do. And then we're going to, again, tack on days at the end of the year when folks have vacations planned. There's a reason we share those calendars so much in advance. So we definitely want to compromise. We definitely want to help. We've offered our students and ROTC to help with parking, to help with cleaning, anything that we can do from a school perspective, even making announcements and sending out announcements through our community channels and communicating voting locations to our school community. We're willing to do all of that. We definitely want to help any way we can and definitely compromise. But for us to have to make this part of what we do, it's better for us to have that advance notice and communicate with our community so that we can prepare a schedule for that. We also proposed to Mr. Mooney maybe surveying our voting community. Like, would you prefer that we postpone or extend our school year to have more voting access, or would you prefer, or would what we have available accommodate your needs? I would love to see how our community would respond to that, if they would be in favor of using one of the 4 available locations as alternate locations, or if they would be more in favor of extending that school year. If that's even an option with the time frame we have right now.
Just one point with regard to the school year. I assume all the board members know this, but in case you don't, the state requirement is that we have to have 170 instructional days. And so whether we have those days as the current calendar provides, or whether we close and have to extend the calendar at the end of the year, we still have to get in the 170 instructional days.
And is any other county taking the legal position that total closure of the entire district is required by law? Is Knox County taking that position, or is it just Bullitt?
And Knox County doesn't have to close because they're not really gaining access to their school. Like the voting community will not have access to their students, building access to encounter their students and staff. From our point of view, like even we look. I'm sorry.
Keep talking. I'm just going to pull the law up.
Okay. From our point of view, like we looked at the option of going to non-traditional instruction, and it's not an option for us to do that. And we can't just shut down the school locations that are going to be voting sites, because that extends the calendar year for just those locations. Of course, then you look at extent, it's just not a viable or cost-effective method to do that as well, to expect to do transportation for 3 schools, food service for 3 schools, and then ask those schools and teachers who are under contract to you 3 schools are going to work those extra days and the rest are going to get off. So as a district, we would have to, it's all or none, I guess, per se. We would have to shut the entire district down and add those days to the end of the school year.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Can I ask a couple of questions quickly?
Sure.
Kevin, it's obvious we're in a position we don't want to be in. It's a position I'm sure most of you don't want to be in. We've got 119 counties that have been approved to date. we're dealing with this when it sounds like there's room for opportunity to do a little better planning with the next cycle of elections, if those start sometime before their calendar gets addressed. Is there no way that you're willing or able to utilize those options that have been discussed here today in lieu of the schools during this cycle, with the commitment to work with the school system going forward, looking at, their schedule going forward and how that might not impact the district as much as it appears to do during this election?
Mr. Johnson, the plan that I have presented is a plan that tries to provide for the best of my voters in my community, to provide the most capacity in probably some of the best qualified buildings inside Bullitt County. When Dr. Bacon came to my office a few weeks ago and we talked just the two of us, all of his requests centered around me not being in Bullitt East High School and North Bullitt High School, but that going to the two middle schools was much preferable to the two high schools. Ultimately, the decision was made, and we agreed, we compromised. We stepped away from those two high schools. They are not on the plan now. We ultimately then looked at and accepted that Zonton Middle School was a very good option. East Side, to the best of my knowledge, East Side and Zonton are basically the same exact school building footprints, but their parking lots are different. East Side is missing a significant amount of asphalt compared to Zonton. Zonton has a much larger footprint for asphalt for customers or for voters to park in. The decision was then made, well, what could we do that still is a compromise, but yet allows us to be in buildings that provide the most capacity for our voters? And that was Mount Washington Middle School, still staying inside the middle school community, as well as the elementary school. I've been made aware that there's some issue regarding that particular elementary school that may or may not have an entrance that's ADA compliant. So I'm willing to compromise on that particular location and walk away from Mount Washington Elementary School, but keeping Mount Washington Middle School because it has an extremely good parking lot. It has good access in and out, and it has a very good sized gym, and it services the needs that we're looking for from our voters, I'm more than happy. I believe my board would give up Mount Washington Elementary School and that we can compromise on that to then use Mount Washington Middle. It was planned to have 7 or 8 voter check-in stations. The other one was going to have 8, one was going to have 7. Ultimately, what I can do with this compromise, it allows me that in 3-day early voting, I can set up a 10-station voter check-in at Mount Washington Middle School. I'll pull 2 of those stations out when we start setting up for Election Day, and I'll use both of those schools for Election Day. And one will have 8 check-ins, one will have 7. And Bullitt East will come online for Election Day with 10. I actually gain capacity by doing this way, and I think stepping away from Mount Washington Elementary School is a good option. I think it's a better option.
If I may, that still doesn't eliminate our need to shut the district down. But Dr. Bacon, from my conversation, did address that you all met, but I believe you're misrepresenting his stance. His stance was still that the schools were not the best viable option, that our stance was that he preferred the schools not be used. Is that correct?
Yes. And we all know that that's been the issue since day one.
Mr. Moody, do you think, based on the data and the early voting data that we've experienced in recent elections, that the 4 locations won't accommodate the early voting turnout? You still have our schools for election day, of course, but based on the data that we're seeing with the early voting numbers and turnout, it seems that that space would be adequate. Those 4 locations would be adequate to accommodate the needs.
Kevin, if I may, real quick, Mr. Wood, to address that question, this is going to be historic turnout. This is going to be unlike most elections. So we can't look back at the 3 the cycles that we've had with early voting, which has been taking place since the 2020 election. We can't look at that data at this moment because, one, early voting was very new to Kentucky. Very new. It's in its infants. I mean, it's an infant right now. We're about to take a huge step and become probably more than a toddler. We're probably going to become a school-age child really quickly. Additionally, there are 2 very heated questions on every Kentucky ballot. One is about constitutional rights for voting, and the other, you're probably very aware of, is about schools, which is a heated topic in Kentucky. So we can't look at the prior data and say, well, Kevin, you should just look at that data and know that this is probably going to be enough. It's not. We have FBI partners, we have CISA partners, we have the State Board of Elections. Additionally, we have federal partners that are in the election space. I just met with probably 30 or 40, it was almost 40 elected leaders who run elections throughout the nation, who are all saying the same thing. We have to be over-prepared in order to be successful. And being over-prepared means expecting there to be massive turnout because of the heated nature of this election. So we can't look at prior data. That's not feasible in this current economic climate. Apologies, Kevin, I cut you off.
No, you're fine. I mean, what she said is completely accurate. I was at an election officials meeting a month ago, and what she's saying is what I heard as well. And it's what has been coming down the pipe to election officials nationally is to be prepared. And this has been a multi-year stepping stone for clerks in this state, Bullitt County included, of what is November 22 going to look like? How are we going to integrate what we've learned from November of 2020 to November of 24? And here we sit. And gentlemen, I wished I wasn't sitting here in the midst of all of this because I have no ill will toward the school system. But I was elected as a county clerk to take care of elections, DMV, and land record recording work for Bullitt County. And ultimately, I am trying to take care of elections in this county. And yes, I am cognizant of the school system. But I also know that Dr. Bacon and I felt like we're beginning to get to a point of agreement, and I agreed, and I compromised. I walked away from 2 of the high schools that I believe are remarkably good facilities and stepped away from them. I stepped into the area of the school system that he suggested, even though it would keep the schools open. Zonton and Eastside were what was offered to me. Zonton is an excellent location. So is Eastside. But the parking and the highway access off of Eastside is not the best in the world. And the middle school is comparable in many ways to Eastside. So we selected that one. And I will compromise again in the middle of this meeting, gentlemen, that I will take Mount Washington Elementary School off the plan. But I will bump up the capacity from 7 or 8 up to 10 for 3-day early voting in an effort to still, because that will be my only voting location in the East. So that's the new and upgraded plan as we sit here right this minute.
I think the members want to compromise. I certainly do. So having gone on the tour on Friday, I'll offer some additional thoughts. I'll start with the good news first. On the north side, I thought Hillview Community Center, I think it has someone's name on it, but the Hillview Community Center actually thought that would work pretty well. It does have a lot of parking. It certainly doesn't have a layout like it's designed for a voting location, but I think it's very workable. And there's another building nearby, the Schott building. I didn't think the parking would be adequate. There's very little parking, and it's shared with a playground that on a Friday afternoon had people on it. On the east side, though, the church said no. The flea market area did not look like a place that voters would feel comfortable. Candidly, the neighborhood wasn't very palatable to try to get people to come to. And the church, as I understand it, the Baptist church has not been responsive. The Calvary Christian Church said no, and the First Baptist Church was not responsive, is my understanding. So for a compromise, I feel like using Mount Washington Middle School in the east and Hillview Community Center in the north is a pretty good deal. The problem is we can't compromise with the school district if they won't compromise. So
the First Baptist Church in Mount Washington is on.
Can I finish speaking?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you. So the problem that we have is there's a sort of Damocles, which is if one single school is utilized, we'll blow up the entire district and shut down everything. And that's what's making it very hard for us to reach an agreement. I'm sorry, go ahead and continue.
Oh, I'm sorry. The Mount Washington First Baptist Church has confirmed use, and we have a letter stating that Mr. Mooney has already reserved that location, according to them, and they are slated for a site or available.
That is correct, because I had created a plan B in the event that the State Board of Elections would not approve my plan. I had to have backup places to go. It is not my primary want to go to, but it is my backup.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
if I may, can we explore the possibility of the Houchins building being a solution to this problem, at least for this year? I mean, it sounds to me like if you all could work that building into the program, you might be able to get where you need to be. Am I missing something here?
I'll respond for myself, then I'll invite the guests to respond. From my perspective, I think the Baptist Church, if in fact they are available, would be a better location than the flea market. The flea market, the area was a little sketchy. I just don't know that voters would feel comfortable. So from my preference, I prefer the church over the flea market. That's my personal view, but I'll throw it open to our guests or other members.
So the flea market is Houchin?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
I was confused on that.
I will say that the Houchins building, flea market building, is a large complex. I have never been through the doors. I have only looked through the windows. And I know that I've seen what appeared to be possibly some wires or lights hanging out of the ceiling. My job as an elected official is I'm not an electrician, and I am not a general contractor. And I don't believe that my budget that I have wiggle room in my budget to try to repair private property with public money.
Kevin, can I ask, do you have assume for the sake of argument that you had to pick between Mount Washington First Baptist Church and the Venture City Flea Market? Which of those two would you think would be preferable?
The church.
Okay, that was my thought on the tour.
Well, does the church solve the problem without the need to use a school building?
Mr. Chandler, what I run into with the school or with the church is it is a very good facility. The church is agreeable to work with, and they have been good. They have been good to me in taking care of some past elections. My problem in this election cycle is that we also have another KRS that goes back to 1997, I believe it is, that we will that we will vote until the last voter votes. And not knowing 100% what the voter turnout is going to be on any of the 3 days of early voting and what 4 o'clock is going to look like. Having the gym floor in the church has no real side court. There are no bleachers. I'm probably less than 10 feet, probably more like 6 feet off of the gym court lines to the edges of the building. What I gain inside a public school facility is this. They have bleachers, and those bleachers can be pushed back, and that then gains me capacity to stack the voters up into lines in some form or fashion, depending on what we're running into, in order to have, because the voters have to be brought inside according to law. The sheriff gets behind the last voter and follows them all the way up to the table to do check-in. That capacity doesn't exist in the same form inside the First Baptist Church. It's not that I don't.
So you're saying that neither the First Baptist Church or the Houchins building are sufficient
In
for
different ways.
3 days of
Yes.
early voting. If they were sufficient, it would solve our problem.
We wouldn't be sitting here talking.
Is there any way we can make them sufficient?
Well, we don't have time to do an add-on to the gym facility to get me another bleachers worth of real estate. And in today's world, trying to get the trades, honestly, in to do something, I can't speak to the Houchins building. I've not been through the door. I've not been inside of it. I've looked through the window, and they were not willing to call me back. I did not call them day after day after day, but I left voice messages across the last couple of years, and I gave up on that facility because they had also put a for sale sign in the building. My experience with real estate that's up for sale, they don't want tenants in there in the event that they get the opportunity for a quick closing. And that's what I've been told. I
appreciate those impediments, and I know that they're real impediments, and I know that you've tried very hard to overcome what impediments you find. On the other hand, closing the school district for a number of days or a week, however much it must be at this late hour, is a substantial cost. I mean, there isn't any question about the substantial nature of that cost. And I mean, we are really at a difficult place. I don't see how I can be in favor of, at this late stage, closing the school district if there's any alternative.
Yeah. Mr. Secretary, can I speak again?
Please.
I can't tell you when the date was on a meeting, but somewhere within the last probably 10 to 15 months, I went to a school board meeting to talk about this was well before this last legislative session, and trying to talk about being able to use the schools again for early voting. I was told very clearly that they were not available for 3-day early voting. I talked about the possibility of rearranging the calendar, and I was told that no. And ultimately, those attempts to try to work on the calendar months and months and months ago, I was told no. And here we sit. And now we don't have the window of time to be able to do it.
May I speak to that as well?
Yes.
He showed up to our board meeting, and again, same situation. Our calendar was already set and in place, and therefore the board was not willing to amend that calendar based on the request. And the need was same need to take that same number of days, a week of school in November, a week of school in May. So that's why the board was not willing to change that calendar, because it was already set in place and agreed upon and voted upon.
Well, I would like to note that the legislature I believe unanimously passed this law that allows the clerks to use school buildings for early voting. I don't think there was even any controversy on the floor in the remarks when it came up for passage. And what Kevin is trying to do is what we have encouraged him to do previously in looking at his plans, which is, and not just Kevin, other clerks too, which is open more locations. So it's not much that we see in the election space that goes through unanimously, but this was unanimous. That was the intent. And I'm concerned that if we have individual county schools say, well, we've got stuff scheduled, then we'll have every county schedule stuff during early voting days. And then when we get to the plan, we won't be able to access a single school building. So there's some room for gamesmanship on this, unfortunately.
On the other hand, there aren't any other examples of school districts using early voting days other than, or being used on early voting days other than Knox County. Is that right?
Is that right? That's my understanding.
That's correct.
Yeah.
The law passed in April of this year.
We're going to lose Corey, looks like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mr. Secretary, I guess I just wanted to say, I'm a member of the board. None of us want to have to vote on this issue that's before us. But if we're going to have a vote, I don't want to be a chicken and leave at 11 o'clock and not have to be on the record either. So I guess my question is, are we going to have a vote today? Is the idea of compromise over, or is there more discussion to occur outside of here? But I just don't want to disappear at 11 and have there be a vote at 11:05 and not be on the record. I think I owe it to be on the record if we're going to have a vote.
So, yeah, we've got just a few minutes before you have to go. If a member has a motion, we'll take up the motion and we'll vote on it.
May I say something?
Can I stop you for 1 second? Member Brangers has made a motion.
I'll go ahead and move the motion to pass Kevin's plan.
So we have a motion to approve Bullitt County's plan as presented. Is there a second?
I second.
Okay. Any discussion?
Mr. Secretary, I just want to be, as much as I would love to comment and respond on this, I am in a conflict, so I have to be shown as stepping back.
So we're going to have one recusal. Is there any discussion among the other members?
I would just like to say one thing, if I may.
Please.
As you said, Mr. Secretary, I've been thinking this the whole time. Legislation was passed. It was unanimous. I don't understand, I guess, why we're at this point now. I think Clerk Mooney has done his job, his due diligence. I know it's not ideal for the schools, but here we are. I'm in support of his plan. I just feel like if there, was opposition to this, I'm sure there's lobbyists that should have voiced their opinion about this before it was ever passed. And here we are at the 11th hour, and, I know how it is whenever you're trying to put an election together. And if this, as we were saying, the turnout that there's going to be, I support Clerk Mooney. I feel like he knows what's best. And if this is a failure, it's all going to come back on him. So I'm in support of his plan.
Okay. Anyone else?
I'm not sure if it's appropriate, but if I could just make one comment, Mr. Chair. The compromise that I see, and I understand everybody's searching for one, since 118 other districts haven't had this issue, it's only in Bullitt County. It seems to me that the compromise should be moving forward so that the district could plan for this and not face the consequences of closing down that we believe is inevitable. So we would ask the board to only compromise it to only approve it in the sense of moving forward, but not for this year. But I appreciate that's up to the board. That's our point.
Well, I think this discussion that's taken place makes it pretty clear that everybody's going to have to start this process earlier if they feel like they need to use school system buildings. So that's one thing that's come out of this conversation. I wish that we could get together and figure out a way to use that church. It sounds to me like it would fix the problem if the church was sufficient. And the one thing I have a concern about is that while I appreciate all the work that Clerk Mooney has done, and I have a long record of supporting county clerks and all their work, and I know they have a difficult problem in a difficult situation. This is not an easy puzzle to put together under any circumstances. So I have a great deal of empathy for that. But I don't know that we have a long history of long lines for early voting. Early voting has been a very different thing from election day. And I think that the odds maybe aren't that great that you're going to have a flood of people and long lines on early voting days. And I just think that the concern of that does not outweigh the concern I would have to close a school district for that period of time. Now, I know this is going to have to be, the General Assembly may even have to take this up in its next session to fix it. And whenever the legislature passes laws, I mean, so often there are unintended consequences, things that people hadn't thought about, things that would happen that just didn't come up in conversation or consideration of the bill in the first place. And now we've got a real world problem that needs to be fixed. But I'm going to hope that you all can make that church work. That would be my preference.
Member Skolnick, I know you have to go. Can I recognize member?
Go ahead and let's move the vote and then just let me make my comment after.
Okay. All right. I would like to vote now if we can, so member Skolnick can participate. All in favor, say aye.
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 Let me have to count here. So Griggs was an aye. Brangers was an aye. Skolnick was an aye. Were there any other ayes?
Yes, Member Sears.
Member Sears. Okay. Opposed?
I'm
Member
opposed.
Chandler? Member Johnson? Did I miss anyone?
You have to go in, you gotta go in the admin. Wait till
So there should be one more though.
Looks like Sue Carroll's gone.
Yeah, I thought my math was right.
Yeah.
Did we lose member Perry?
We did, and we've been trying to get her back. She just having internet issues.
May I make a comment, Mr. Secretary? I know I'm late, which is okay, but I would hope that, not everybody's in favor of what we just voted for, but it's what we voted for. Maybe we can work together, if it's a legal concern to go into a court to get permission and authority to keep the schools open. I hope we can work together now to find a way to minimize any impact from this. I think all of us would have liked to have voted differently, who voted yes, but this is also what's before us now. And so there's no shrinking away from that either. But I do hope there's collective action to now make this work.
I would, if I could add one more thought, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I really do think that we've learned a lot in this process. I'm sure glad it's only one county and not 60. But I do encourage both parties to begin talking about this going into the future, regardless of what we do in this fall election. I think there's got to be more discussion earlier in the process, and I would just encourage that.
Mr. Secretary, if I may.
Sorry, just 1 second. Member Brangers have been recognized.
I just actually have a request of Clerk Mooney is, our sheriff's departments are, or the sheriff is a member of our local board of elections. And I would like to request that you go to the sheriff and at any of these school locations, we really need to have a sheriff's deputy there at all times, not one that is there and then leaves. I just think they're our partners in this and we need them to commit to that. So if you could try to work that out, I would really be appreciative of that.
I understand.
Member Sears? I'm sorry, hold on 1 second. Member Sears?
Yes, I am not in support. I agree with what's been said with the schools. I am not in support of shutting the schools down. But as Tabitha mentioned, it's going to be a very unique and a very unpredictable election, as we all know. I'm a parent. I'm also a former student that lived with grandparents that didn't have means to take care of us when we needed, when school was out. So again, I understand all of those challenges. I wish the board could have worked together with the two boards, the school board and the local board of elections. But unfortunately, the fact that they haven't has been mentioned in his earlier opening statement. It puts us in a very challenging position. And unfortunately, painfully, because of that, and because we don't have a resolution as a compromise, I have to vote in support of what's been presented to us today.
Go ahead, Kevin.
I'm going to say that just so the board knows, in the letter that I wrote to Dr. Bacon, I had a line in there that I would very much like to meet with him starting in January or February of next year to start looking at this calendar going forward through the use of bullet days, professional development days, and what have you, to work these calendars for the compromise between what a county board of elections needs as well as what a public school system needs. I believe it's there. It's just a matter of us getting together.
Yeah, right.
Well, we have 17 items on the agenda. This is number 4, so we need to get moving. The yays were 4, the nays were 2. Member Ferris recused. So the plan is approved, and we'll go on to the next item. I do think we'll have several quick, easy items, though. Number 5, ratification or approval of county boards of elections replacements. The Republican member in Clark County resigned, and the Republican member in Marion County passed away. And so we have in the board book the nominations by those 2 counties' parties. So that would be Daniel Vetter in Clark County and Richard Anderson in Marion County. Did I miss anything?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Wood and I be excused.
Yes, certainly. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for your time.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Do we have a motion to approve these nominations? So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Next, approval or ratification of additional precinct officers for Mercer County.
This is in Mercer County. They've asked for 1 additional officer for 4 precincts. They have 1 location, 1 officer there. And this is for ratification, correct? For ratification to include 1 additional officer at the precinct, at 4 precinct locations.
Okay, do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Next, approval of memorandum of understanding between the State Board of Elections and the Administrative Office of the Courts.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a memorandum of understanding This will outline the responsibilities between SBE and AOC related to new legislation. That AOC is to provide us a list monthly of any non-citizens that present for jury duty so that we may remove them from the voter rolls. And that's pretty much what it is. We have a similar agreement with them over the list they provide us of felons each month. So this is very similar to that.
Okay, do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Ayes have it. Next, approval of GIS data exchange of information agreements between the State Board of Elections and the Department of Revenue. Did I have that right?
Well, right, and it's several agencies that oversee this GIS, including finance and administration plus COT. And Richard could speak. I'll briefly mention it if he has anything to add, but this allows SBE to proceed with having secure access to the GIS data source of the, of COT. We can exchange data. There's no cost associated with this. It would be read-only that we would have access to, but it certainly will assist our agency moving forward as we continue our GIS program here at State.
So we're reaching an agreement with two separate parts of the Finance and Administration Cabinet, the Department of Revenue and the Commonwealth Office of Technology. So they're both under.
Yes, they're all under the.
Okay.
But it will allow us to move forward with being a part of that program and getting access to that data, which we don't have right now. But we have the ability to receive. Is that good, Richard? Yes.
Do we have a motion to approve?
I'll move.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Okay, next we have Rachel Pointer with the financial report. Rachel?
All right, I will try to stay on theme with quick moving here for you all today. The first page in your board book is just a summary of our allotments in our budget for fiscal year 2025. These are the breakdowns of what type of funding we have and what the amounts of the allotments in the budget bill were given to us. I will say, and this is a very small amount for the presidential electors in the general fund, but we have never received that before, and I'm calling that a win for this year at that $5,000. And then
what do we spend that money on?
The presidential electors travel and any expenses that they pay, it's usually absorbed in our regular operating budget, but we did ask for it in this budget and they did give it to us. I will call that successful. In the last meeting, I said that I was going to give you any updates about where the end of fiscal year 24. We did not have any transactions after that meeting, and so all of your transactions that were included in the June board book were final, and that was the end of our year. So we did not have to do any movement there at that time after those were complete. We don't have many anomalies here in July to start out fiscal year 25. There are some higher expenses than you normally see, and those are mostly because first quarter payments of all types come out in those departments. There is one transaction that is a higher expense than the others, and we did pay our ERIC dues. And so you can find that under other expenses, under your general fund operating budget. That is, I'll have a page number.
And that's once annually, right?
Once annually, we will not pay that again. All of our other transactions are pretty straightforward, mostly renewals. That's unfortunately the time they come into play is typically for IT software, and licensure happens in June and July. So you're going to see some of those expenses in there, but everything else is pretty standard. I will say that during the time between our last meeting and this meeting, we completed our closing package and submitted to statewide accounting services. And we have also completed our CFA, which is our federal expenditure and revenue report. And that has already been, that was submitted, I think 2 weeks early. And that has already been approved by the controller's office.
Any questions? If not, can we have a motion to approve the report?
So move.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Any opposed? Nice have it. We're gonna stay with Rachel. Next, we have a review of memorandum of agreement for HAVA election security fund reimbursements to counties that purchase voting privacy booths.
Yes, so we did, the board approved the memorandum of agreement template that we had stated for the HAVA election security funding to the counties for privacy booths. The deadline for those counties to get in their applications for that funding was July the 31st. We have 48 counties that have applied for reimbursement and their totals are listed there. Secretary, I don't know how you want to do this. Do you want to list the counties out loud?
I don't think we need to. I think we have an adequate record for the minutes.
Okay.
Any questions? How are the funds, what's the formula? How are these numbers decided on?
So every county received $8,300 in eligibility. They could use that same number in any amount between the two types of security cards or privacy booths, and any combination of those items up to the 8,300. Some counties went all privacy booths, some counties went a combination of both. So these 48 counties did request a portion or all of their funding for privacy booths.
Okay.
And these will result in an individual contract or upon two with each of the counties listed.
That we'll have to vote on when we come back.
This is the vote for them now. Once they vote on those, we will go ahead and execute the contract with the county.
Got it. Okay. Any questions? Do we have a motion to approve?
So move.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I second. Thank you. Next, we have Taylor with our draft regulation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everybody, or what's left of everybody.
Good morning.
That too. I'd sent y'all a draft of an admin reg and just a little backstory for everybody that might be watching. There was a piece of legislation that was passed in the last session that led to an amendment to our statute that allows us to, we have another statute that allows us to promulgate regs that we feel are necessary. This is the statute that the legislature feels that these regs are necessary. So it added on to that and said promulgate an admin reg to have an audit after the election that includes a hand-to-eye recount. And it's, if you look at it's KRS 117-383. And this one's a lot more detailed than the rest of the provisions in that KRS. So it kind of lays out the actual hand-to-eye recounting in the statute. We just needed to pass the regulation to bring it into existence. So the law came effective in July. I'm bringing you all this here. This is the August meeting. The draft that I sent you was in the form of an emergency administrative regulation to get that on the books, so to speak, to have it for November. Because as y'all know, with some of these other admin regs that we've gone through, the process is quite lengthy. As a matter of fact, even if we had, put something together way back when we even thought this might be the law, the process still wouldn't have played out by November. So we had thought maybe there was a possibility of an emergency reg. That's why I sent you an emergency draft. The governor's office has gotten back with us, and their position is that there was no emergency clause on the legislation itself. So they feel it should play out as just an ordinary reg, since it is in our ordinary reg promulgating statute. So everything I sent you is still the same, except we just would not need the statement of emergency first page. The body of the reg otherwise would be the exact same. So what I'm asking for, I guess, is a vote for authorization to go ahead and go through the promulgation process for this reg, subject as always, I guess, to any of the non-substantive tweaks that LRC staff finds that they need to make for their purposes. Oh yeah, there's as we've had before, there's a public notice process that sometimes even after that, there'll be changes that need to be made, and as long as they're non-substantive, I wouldn't make any substantive changes to the reg. But like I said, I think this reg, when you look at it, there's only 3 sections. One of them's a definition. The other says if there's not a definition, use common sense, essentially. And it's not a very lengthy reg because the process is spelled out in that statute. So I'm asking for.
I have a question.
Sure.
So to your point, the reg was pretty short, largely as incorporation of these forms. If we're not going to have this formally in place for November through enacted the governor, is there any reason that we can't simply just share this as a document with the county clerks in case they find themselves in that situation?
So no, we can share this with all 120 county clerks, and I'd like to. This is all happening, recently. I'd like to maybe have conversations with your staff about whether, because money has been allotted for this year and next year, if we read the law to allow counties that would like to voluntarily go through this year, if they can.
So, question.
Member Johnson?
So without a reg in place for November, which we're not going to have, are you suggesting that it's voluntary only in the counties?
I'm suggesting that use of the forms would be voluntary. I think that would pass muster. I don't think compliance with the statute would be discretionary. They'd have to do that.
Gotcha.
But I think these forms are really just for their ease and some order and regularity to it. If we don't have an emergency reg to compel the use of these forms, I think at the least it's just informally we can share them just for the ease of conducting the process.
But the law is already in effect. I mean,
Well,
so
that's the law is to promulgate an admin reg that says these things. So that's why I say I think the conversation of whether this actually occurs, whether the practice occurs post-election occurs or not needs to happen. But I think regardless of whatever we land on there, the reg needs to move. So
it seems to me like that.
Mr. Chairman.
One second.
I know there's no emergency clause on legislation, but
well,
in order for us to move forward, it seems like that.
I know that's why we asked that it not be put in the promulgating regs statute, because the statute it doesn't say there will be this. It says we will promulgate a reg to create this. And so if we don't have the reg that creates it,
So but then we're gonna end up creating confusion across the state because we don't have the reg in place because of the time allotment. That seems like a emergency situation to me. Can we go back to the office and ask again? I mean, it just, you know, for the purpose of us being able to do what we need to do.
I'm happy to ask again, yes.
Mr. Chairman, yeah.
Go ahead.
Taylor, as I read that statute, it's extremely detailed. I mean, can't imagine a regulation that would be much more detailed than that, than the amendments to this particular statute are. Can we not simply provide the guidance that your office, the staff would normally provide to the clerks? I mean, if the governor is not going to declare it an emergency, I think that's his discretion. But it doesn't seem to me that it's that complicated to read the statute and know what to do.
Right. I guess it's we'll just talk about it here. The discussion I think we need to have is whether the clerks can actually get into the ballot boxes. I think they can, but I don't want to because it says specifically in the amendment to that statute, it's the Secretary of State's call, so I didn't want to make that call without talking to his staff. But I think it can happen in November. I just don't think it happens necessarily under the reg. So, and it wouldn't be mandatory for all 120 counties. It would be more of a voluntary thing because it's not the law to do it will be the admin reg. The law of how to do it is what was passed by the legislature.
I got confused, which is not unusual. It looks like the only role that the board plays in it is the reg. I mean, the management of it, it's done at the local level, it's done under the supervision or the oversight of the Secretary of State. I mean, do we have any role at all in this process except to pass the reg?
I think you read that right, Member Johnson. We promulgate the reg, we create the forms, but then once this happens, it's the Secretary of State's office picking the race that's being audited, the machine that's going to be audited, and then the results of all that will be reported to SOS again, as well as the Attorney General. So there's no reporting back to us. It's like you said, just kind of putting the reg out there with the forms. And then, you know, after we do this a time or two, if we realize what forms we start off with need to be tweaked, we would come back and tweak the forms. But that would be really our role in this in the future.
And then to the point, if I could, I mean, they take under this statute, they take away the right for us to do any risk limiting audits or anything like that. So we're out of the game as it relates to risk limiting. I don't know, based upon that, if I mean, I get what you're saying, that the law was for us to do a reg, but back to Eric's position, it looks like clerks are bound. I defer to Tabitha. I mean, I don't know what they think, but I don't know whether or not that creates a right to not do it, the fact that the reg may not be in place. I just don't know, but it certainly takes away our right, or, you know, that we do the risk limiting audit, if I'm correct on that.
Well, and I would go further to suggest that maybe it implicitly takes away any duty we have to for oversight of this particular process. And puts the oversight on the Secretary of State's office, which makes me wonder if it's a good idea for us to provide advice as to how to do it. until a reg is promulgated.
That's a good point, Mr. Chandler.
Well, I should get us back to the business, which is to begin the process by the board approving the ordinary regulation. So let me just get back to that. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion on adoption of the ordinary regulation? Okay. All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay. So we'll do that right now. We will touch base offline and see what we need to do for November. Right. Okay. Very good. Next, Tabitha for the KCCA.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for allowing us to be on the call this morning. Just back to the regulation that was just voted on. The clerk's stance is that we would have to comply with the law. That we would have to, look at that, comply with it. The intent of the law was that it would be in place for the fall election. We're certainly willing to chime in if the state board needs leadership of KCCA to reach out to the governor's administration to talk about how this needs to be in place for us so that we can ensure that all 120 county clerks have clear direction.
I'm trying to get off from
on
here.
what they're doing. So, and what this post-election audit looks like for us. We all, of course, want to be good partners and comply with the law and do what is needed in order to ensure that that the law's followed. So, moving on, we are certainly in full swing of election planning. We actually just had a really great training last week with several clerks on a panel to talk about what's happening in each county, to share ideas on ways to ensure that our lines are not in excess on early voting and election day. While some of you feel that early voting turnout has not been strong in some locations, we're expecting that to surge because we have several partners who are willing to step up, like the Secretary of State, some other folks who are working to ensure that voters know all of their options for election day. One of the ideas that came out of that training session that we have was training candidates. So many clerks are looking to reach out to all candidates who are on the ballot, minus the presidential candidates, but anyone who would have local boots on the ground, knocking on doors, to share all of the options for voting with the candidates so that they're well informed on the process. So that is one thing that we're looking towards. Another thing that we're talking about internally is if there are lines, being able to pass out sample ballots, or at minimum, the questions that are on the ballot that seem to take voters a little more time to read through, passing those out while they're in line to ensure that they have an opportunity to read those before they get to the ballot booth. So those are just a few things that I wanted to highlight this morning. Additionally, the county clerks are working on legislation already. We're presenting at the state fair this week in front of the elections committee to discuss funding opportunities for the state to help counties fund elections. As many of you are aware, 90%, just over 90% of all of the funding for elections come on the backs of the county taxpayer. It's not funded by the state. So 90% of the funding is from the county tax roll. So we're looking to work with our legislators to ensure that funding is a little more adequate. So that's all that I have. I'm happy to take any questions this morning.
Thank you. Any questions for Tabitha? All right. Thank you, Tabitha.
Mr. Chairman, I apologize, but I'm going to have to leave. I'm late for another meeting already. I don't know if there's another action that's immediate to be taken, but
I don't think we have any more votes on the agenda.
I also have to leave, Mr. Secretary, for the same reason. I've actually got an ongoing meeting and I've been supposed to be in the whole time.
Okay. Sorry about that, guys.
We're gonna lose a quorum, when you two leave. I'm not being critical. But I don't think that we have anything else to vote on. Are we
Okay.
able to table anything else that we have for discussion?
So I think we just have
Make my
our
report.
report. I said, I think, yeah, we just have your report.
Just my
which-
report and other business. I don't think we've had any other business. I did.
Do we have anything that we need to discuss in closed session and then vote on?
You have to vote on that.
No.
Carmine was just gonna give us an update.
Okay.
I thought we might talk about the things that we talked about today, but we can do that another time.
If we have 4 members, are we able to have an informational meeting or do we have to just stop?
You can keep going as long as you don't.
Okay.
We're not.
As long as we're not voting on it.
Okay, so I've been advised that we're able to continue as a matter of law, as long as we don't vote on anything and we don't have anything to vote on, we're able to receive reports and things of that nature. So thank you all for your patience and thank you for being on through this meeting, and we'll see you in September. Thanks very much.
Thanks a lot, guys. Sorry you have to leave.
Not at all. I've got a hard stop coming up myself,
Okay.
so
Well, do you want me to defer my report?
go ahead,
I mean,
go ahead.
I'll just be very brief. I was going to say we're 77 days from November 5th. Just as Tabitha said, the clerks are working hard. We were there last week at their meeting. They have a lot of good training going on. We as well are underway in getting things done, as I know your office is. The 21st of September, the absentee portal will open. I think that's an important day. October 7th is the last day to register for the general election. That's an important day. And that the books are closed from that day until 7 days after the election. So those are important days. Today, we will have all the county polling locations up and available for voters to access, where their polling locations are by county and where their Dropbox location is, and it's at the govote.ky.gov site. We've asked the clerks to review online so we can make sure of the accuracy of where people are voting. Also, the voter information center now was upgraded for the May primary, and if you go in and check your, to make sure you're registered, you'll be able to see your polling locations for election day there as well. I will say that SBE is also presenting at the interim joint committee on state government on Thursday, and we will be doing our annual list maintenance report, which will also be publicly available on our website. So anyone that want to access that. So there we go. I'll conclude.
Okay, any questions for Karen? All right. I'll ask this, but I can't call it a business, even if it exists. Is there any other business before the board? There are no more votes. I don't think there is. We don't have the votes to call a closed session.
And there was nothing, we didn't need to make a decision on anything. It was just an update, so.
So we're just gonna table that then, okay? All right. Okay,
Recording that.
well, now we do have the votes for a closed session.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, so, informational only, but I believe we have litigation to discuss. Do we also have security?
I'd like to, one thing quickly.
Okay. So, can I get a motion to go briefly into closed session to discuss pending litigation and security?
I'll move.
Second.
All in favor, say
Aye.
okay, so we don't have any more votes today, just that. When we come back out of closed session, we'll simply confirm our next meeting on September 17th, 10 a.m. And then we'll adjourn, but that's all we have left. So, thanks, I'll see you in just a second.
And I want to apologize